The stock market wrapped up Wednesday with a mixed tone, and Webull found itself under pressure, sliding nearly 4% to close at $14.34. For Webull investors, this might feel like déjà vu, another pullback just as it seemed like the stock was starting to build some momentum. But this isn't just about Webull. The bigger picture here is that the entire market is holding its breath ahead of the Jackson Hole Symposium, and Jerome Powell's upcoming speech is looming over every tick of the tape. Let's start with Webull itself. The company is still in a fundamentally strong position. It recently celebrated its first profitable quarter, a huge milestone for any fintech. Profitability means sustainability, and in the world of online brokers, that's a big deal. Add to that its $1 billion equity facility, which gives Webull both flexibility and security as it tries to expand into new verticals like crypto, and you can see why many investors still have long-term faith in this platform. User growth is another factor that can't be overlooked. Webull has amassed around 24 million registered users globally, with many coming from a younger demographic that brokers like Robinhood and eToro have also targeted. These users are not just dabbling in stocks, they're looking for ways to engage with options, ETFs, and crypto. This positions Webull right at the intersection of retail enthusiasm and financial technology. However, none of these positives were enough to shield Webull's stock from the broader pullback that swept through markets midweek. And the reason is clear: Jackson Hole. Every year, the Federal Reserve uses the symposium to outline the direction of monetary policy, and Powell's words often move everything from bonds to commodities to equities. The stakes this year feel especially high. Markets are looking for clarity on when the Fed might finally cut rates. Inflation has been easing, but not as fast as some would like, and Powell has been consistent in his message: the Fed will remain data-dependent. That phrase, data-dependent, is what spooks markets. It means no guarantees, no timeline, just waiting on the numbers. For growth stocks and risk-on assets like Webull, this creates a cloud of uncertainty. If Powell leans hawkish in his Jackson Hole address, emphasizing the need to keep rates higher for longer, we could see yields spike in equities, particularly speculative tech and fintech names, sell off even further. On the other hand, if Powell leaves the door open to cut sooner rather than later, sentiment could flip quickly, and Webull could benefit from renewed risk appetite. So, what does this mean for investors watching Webull? First, it means acknowledging that this week's price action is less about Webull itself and more about the macro backdrop. The fundamentals haven't changed in the last 48 hours. The company is still profitable, still growing, and still exploring new opportunities. But the market's mood has shifted as it waits for Powell, and in that environment, even strong companies can see their stocks drift lower. From a technical standpoint, Webull is hovering around an important support level between $14 and $14.50. If it can hold that zone, it might form a base and be ready to move higher once the macro uncertainty clears. But if it breaks below, we could see another leg down, potentially into the $13 range. On the upside, $15 remains a key resistance. A break above that level could re-establish bullish momentum. Beyond the charts, it's worth considering Webull's narrative relative to its peers. Robinhood, for example, has been aggressively pushing into crypto and recently launched features to appeal to more advanced traders. Webull, meanwhile, has quietly built out its international presence and is relaunching its crypto arm through Webull Pay. This gives it exposure to one of the most dynamic corners of finance. If Bitcoin continues to hold above $60,000 and enthusiasm returns to the crypto space, Webull could benefit indirectly as more retail traders return to platforms that make it easy to move between stocks and crypto. Another element in Webull's favor is diversification. Unlike some of its rivals, it hasn't leaned too heavily on one single revenue stream. Payment for order flow, interest income, options trading, and now crypto, these give the company multiple levers to pull. That means it's less vulnerable to a downturn in any single market. Still, investors need to be realistic. The short-term story here is dominated by Powell and Jackson Hole. In fact, if we zoom out, the pattern is familiar. Each summer, markets wait to see what the Fed chair will say, and volatility often picks up in the days before the speech. This week's Webull pullback fits neatly into that pattern. It's not so much a judgment on the company as it is a reflection of the nervous energy coursing through the market. What should investors watch for on Friday? Powell's tone will be everything. If he emphasizes patience, caution, and the need to keep rates higher for longer, we could see another round of selling. But if he acknowledges the progress on inflation and hints at potential easing down the road, risk assets like Webull could rebound quickly. There's also the question of broader market psychology. Many investors are already positioned defensively, with money flowing into treasuries and cash-like instruments. That means any dovish surprise could unleash a wave of buying as investors rotate back into growth. Webull would almost certainly benefit from that. So, what's the takeaway here? For long-term investors, nothing has changed. Webull remains a strong fintech player with a clear growth trajectory and new opportunities on the horizon. The short-term pullback is less about its fundamentals and more about the uncertainty surrounding Fed policy. For traders, the setup is clear. $14 is the line in the sand on the downside, $15 on the upside. A break either way could set the tone for the next move. For everyone else, the message is patience. Jackson Hole has a way of shaking markets, but it doesn't change the underlying strengths or weaknesses of individual companies. Webull's story is still intact. The timing of when that story gets rewarded is what remains uncertain. In the end, this is a moment where macro headlines overshadow micro fundamentals. Powell's words will carry more weight than any earnings call or product announcement Webull could make right now. That can feel frustrating for investors, but it's also a reminder of how interconnected markets really are. So as we head into the weekend, the focus isn't just on Webull. It's on the Fed, the economy, and whether Powell signals that relief is on the horizon. For now, Webull sits in a holding pattern, waiting alongside the rest of the market.